Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining me again today as we continue walking together the inner and outer pilgrimage for peace that Alberto and I embarked on 25 years ago. And in the last episode, I introduced this idea of being willing as a key to understanding peace. This idea of being willing to be led, being willing to be shown another way. And that without this willingness, I probably would not have recognized the call to walk to Jerusalem, because I would not have been in presence. I would not have been paying attention. I would not have been aware of what's going on around me and what's going on within me. And so I thought, for those of you who may not know the story of how I was guided to walk to Jerusalem, I just take a moment to share that. And so this call actually came while I was on the Camino. I had been walking for, I would say, a couple of weeks. I had reached the meseta, and I forget the town I was in, but I had arrived at the albergue, and I was just, had just taken a shower. I was sitting outside and just relaxing. And there were other pilgrims who were milling about at the same time. And the unusual incident, or the unusual aspect of it, was that there were three pilgrims that were sitting together speaking in English. Now, back then in 2001, that really wasn't such a common occurrence to have English being heard on the Camino. I didn't know them, and I was feeling a little bit shy. I didn't want to, interrupt their conversation, because they seemed to be having like a really deep conversation. But I did kind of nudge myself a little closer, and I sat close enough to be able to hear what they were saying. And they were talking about, these pilgrimages, the pilgrimages that every pilgrim who is on this path of spiritual awakening, any pilgrim who is a seeker, seeking for truth and seeking for understanding, the three pilgrimages, the three paths that each one should walk, or is invited to walk. And the Camino de Santiago, is one of those paths, and it is called the Way of the Sword. It is the place where you battle your fears. It's the place where you look at the things within you that you don't want to look at, and you heal them. It's the place where you find your courage. It's the place where you face, if you will, those aspects of yourself that you normally don't want to look at. And, with great courage, you're able to look at them and to make peace with them and to move ahead beyond them. So this was the Camino, the way of the sword, the way of courage. And there was another path. The other path that pilgrims are invited to walk is called the Way of the Heart, or the Way of Love. And it's the path that leads from Canterbury Cathedral in England, and that leads to Rome, to Vatican City in Rome. And this Camino, this Way of the Heart, on this path is where you explore the meaning of love. Not just the meaning of love in a romantic sense, but the broader definitions of love, including and especially divine love. What does that mean? What is love? And how do we invite its presence into our lives? So the Way of Love was the second path that led to Rome. And then there was another path that led to Jerusalem. And this path was called the Way of the Soul. And it is the place where on that journey you discover your soul's purpose. You connect with that part of yourself that is longing for something greater, longing to connect with something more than just the everyday, longing for that connection with the spirit or with the divine. And as soon as I heard that there was, the other paths were interesting, but as soon as I heard that there was a path that leads to Jerusalem, and that is where you connect with your soul's highest longing, I just knew this is what I had. This is the path I was going to walk. This is what I'm going to do. And it was one of those moments where it's kind of hard to put into words, because it just came it's like a knowing, a sudden, clear, definite knowing that this is for me. This path is for me. And obviously it makes sense, where I was and kind of seeking and going, I want something that has meaning. I want something with purpose. It makes sense that I would feel this inner kind of excitement to go, yes, that's what I'm going to do, the way of the soul. And so I held on to that. I took that with me. I said, I think this is my sign. This is what I think I'm being led to do, is to walk this way, but I don't know, I'm not sure. And so I was open to kind of receive more information, to receive more confirmation, to see if this was indeed my path. And that confirmation came not long after. I had kept walking and my steps led me into Galicia. And I arrived in one of the albergues. I think the town was called Murias de Rechivaldo, I think is what it was. And I had arrived at that albergue just after Astorga. And what's interesting is that I didn't stay in Astorga, which, every pilgrim says you've got to stay in Astorga. It's such a beautiful town and city, and you've got to visit its cathedral and all the wonderful architecture there. But something inside of me said no. And I kept on walking. And I remember walking that day and feeling like, no, Astorga is not for me. There is something else ahead for me. And I ended up in Murias, and I found a bed, one of the few places back then that were not bunk beds. I actually had a bed all to myself in the albergue. And as I was kind of settling in for the evening, the sun was kind of, starting to set, and I was just winding down, starting to write in my diary. I was actually sitting in my bed and I was just writing in my diary. I see a man walk in, and he's dressed in like a white tunic with like white pants, white tunic, with a big kind of red cross across his chest. And, I was looking at him going, I'm blinking, going, is this real? Like, who is this? Who is this man? He looked to be, a little bit older, maybe I would say in his 60s perhaps, and salt and pepper hair, dark kind of thick rimmed glasses, and he's going around and he's talking to all the different pilgrims, and just like something out of a movie. It was all very surreal. He makes his way over to me with a big smile, and he starts speaking to me in Spanish, and I don't know what he's saying, but he's got a huge smile on his face, and I understand from his, just from the way he's speaking, that he's asking if I'm doing well, and I say yes, I'm doing well, and I thank him. And as he's kind of sitting there talking to me, I realize he's wearing a medallion. And the medallion he's wearing across his chest kind of flashes like something in a movie. And I see the words Jerusalem. I see the word Jerusalem blazoned across this pendant, this big kind of medallion that he's wearing. And I just freeze for a moment, and I don't know how to communicate. I don't know what to do. And he moves on and he's speaking to other pilgrims, and then he just kind of leaves. And it's like I'm left kind of flabbergasted and saying, Jerusalem, this guy, who is this guy? And when I kind of asked around, like nobody seemed to be able to know who this person was. And I just thought, this is a sign, clearly. I mean, obviously I've got to find this man, but how do I find this man? I have no idea. So I just said, okay, I'm just going to take it as kind of one more confirmation that there is something about this way of the soul that I'm being invited to walk to Jerusalem. And so the next day I put on my backpack once again, and I start walking the path. I'm still, in the mountains of Galicia, of course. I arrived to Cruz de Ferro. For those of you who are familiar, the place where many pilgrims leave behind whatever it is that no longer serves them, their fears, their whatever it is that keeps them kind of feeling small or limited or unable. And I stopped for a moment, but I didn't stay very long. I just felt I've got to continue forward, and I don't know what was just carrying me forward. But as soon as I just kept on going, I walked not even like a little bit, I don't know, half a kilometer or something, and I hear a bell. I hear a bell ringing, and I'm thinking, what is this? And I keep walking and I keep following the sound, And the pilgrims who know what I'm talking about know you're going to come to I came to this kind of put together, hobbled together shack. It looked like a shack, literally, in the middle of nowhere, just as I'm going down the hill. And the person that was ringing the bell was none other than that same man that I had met the day before, calling everybody to say, let's go, like, come on, vámonos, vámonos, we're going to pray. I was like, I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was that I'm at the right place. I'm at the right place. And I dropped my backpack and I just followed him. I didn't know what was happening. There were pilgrims that were gathered around he had like a little makeshift altar with a cross on it. And I didn't understand what he was saying exactly, but all I heard clearly was paz, peace, and Jerusalem, Jerusalem. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is my confirmation. This is what I need. This is what I'm asking for. And obviously the man was Tomas, and he was a Templar, one of the Templar knights, one of the last Templar knights that was on the Camino, and the place I was at was Marjarin. And as much as I wanted to connect with him, to speak with him, anything, obviously communication was a barrier. I didn't know how to speak with him. And everyone seemed to want a piece of Tomas, a piece of his attention, a piece of, his wisdom, anything that he would share with them. And I spent the night there, and I didn't get anything more from him at that moment, but a piece of me knew that I was coming back. He was an important piece of my pilgrimage, and I was determined to communicate with him. I was determined to find a way to connect and to see what else there was with this mercurial entity, figure named Tomas. And that is what I did. Actually, I finished walking the Camino, and I really felt called back to work as a hospitalera in Manjarin. Now, those of you who know Manjarin, this is, again, 25 years ago. There was no electricity, no running water, no services. I mean, there was no washrooms, no toilets. There was nothing. Like, it literally was like a shack in the middle of nowhere. And we had to get water from the big basins that were, further down the road. The cooking, you prepared and did what you could for the pilgrims every single night. You washed up everything. You were part of a small group that worked hard. We worked really hard to serve the pilgrims, and we did whatever was needed. I did everything. There were no toilets. That was a good thing, I guess, because you just basically found a spot out in the bush somewhere. But the hospitality of the pilgrims, the welcoming of the pilgrims, the tending not just to the outer, but very much the inner journey of pilgrims. This was really what I saw in those 2 weeks that I was there with Tomas. And to my great surprise and my great gratitude was that there were 2 people that spoke English there. And eventually I was able to communicate with Tomas, kind of my calling, this inner call that I felt I was being guided to walk to Jerusalem, and obviously the deep fear that carried with it, to walk to Jerusalem alone. And, obviously this meant this is not like a Camino that we have in Spain, the Camino de Santiago. There are no white arrows. There are no yellow arrows. There's no path that you walk on. There are no albergues waiting for you. This is literally walking on the side of the road, is what I quickly realized talking to him. But he was so supportive and so incredibly kind and generous, in the sense of saying, you can do this. And in fact, he told me he had a friend from the Netherlands whose name was Jeanette, and that he would try to get me in touch with her, see if he could call her and get her to speak with me, which I was so surprised at, that there was another pilgrim who had walked to Jerusalem from the Netherlands, and she had done it by herself. And he did manage to get her on the line from Manharin. It was a miracle in itself that we could get that to work with the cell phone that he had back then, or the phone. I don't even know if it was his phone or some phone that he borrowed. In all cases, I spoke with Jeanette very briefly, and she invited me to come visit her in the Netherlands. She told me that not only had she walked to Jerusalem, but she also knew of another pilgrim, another woman whose name was Johanna, who had also walked to Jerusalem, also another Dutch woman. And I thought, this is an incredible synchronicity. And really these two, being aware of these two women, knowing that there were others who had done this, and that it wasn't maybe such a crazy idea, that this was possible, really gave me a lot more confidence. Even though I was still a little bit nervous about doing it, I really felt this was the call. This is my next step. This is what I was asking for. And on the one hand, I was very very excited. It's like, oh, I have a next step. What I'm asking for has been answered. So, because I've been walking, I'm walking and I'm asking, and I'm saying, what do? I want something that is meaningful. I want something that I feel is an important part of my journey. And the message comes very clearly that says, walk the way of the soul to Jerusalem. And as excited as I was, there was a big part of me that said, really? You want me to do that? I was thinking something along the lines of a job at the United Nations or something. I wasn't thinking of walking by myself to Jerusalem. That was a little bit outside of the realm of what I had imagined. And, looking back on it now, it does reveal for me an interesting kind of lesson, because it makes me realize that, we all kind of want the answer that we think best solves the problem. But, but we want it based on how we have defined the problem. That's kind of the interesting thing. I was thinking inside of the limits of what I could understand. I have these skills from the business world, and I have all of these abilities that I think I could apply to a problem or to a life that I could feel very satisfied in living. But that's clearly not what was in store for me. And so, a lot of times we have to stop, and I have to stop many times myself and say, what if I really haven't defined the problem correctly? Maybe this isn't even a problem. Maybe I'm not even asking the right question. And again, unless I'm willing to surrender or to put aside my own definitions, my own framings of what I think a problem is, then I really can't be open to a different answer. The answer is always going to be limited to the confines of this question, of the question that I ask. So that was really something for me to consider, and it's something that I continue to be aware of even to this day. How willing am I, how willing am I to be truly shown a different way, a way that I had not even considered before, especially when it comes to talking about peace. Am I really willing to open myself to completely not define the problem, not define the solution, but simply open myself up to receive another way of understanding what I have defined as a problem? And so, I had received on the Camino what I was asking for, which was to be shown the next step. And even though it wasn't what I had expected, there was a part of me that was actually very excited about this possibility, very feeling very confident that if I am being guided to do this, then everything is going to be okay. Obviously, it wasn't my imagination. It wasn't just one random sign. It was a series of things that built one upon the other that were saying, this is the next path. And I felt confident in it, even though, of course, there was a lot of doubts and there was a lot of concerns. And again, this would have been, when was that? I would say that would have been around August of 2001, around that time, August of 2001. And the more I started to kind of speak about this idea, and the more people that I told about this idea, the kind of the crazier the idea sounded even to me. But the more that people said that it was a crazy idea, the more I either believed them and I became more afraid, or I became defensive. Trying to explain, this idea, trying to explain to them that it's not just a random thought, this was a calling, that I'm being guided to do this. Trying, to have them see reason, and to have them see me as somebody who is rational and who knows what they're doing. And so I was blaming other people, blaming the others, for being the cause of all of the doubts and the fears that I seemed to be experiencing. And I think anybody who has thought of walking a Camino, or anyone who has a thought of following a personal dream, or a heart song that they have, or of even just exploring outside the confines of what they and other people expect, has come across this, has come across this thing of, you get this, you have this dream, you have this, you're all excited about something, an idea that comes to you, you tell people, and they either support you or they try to talk you out of it. And you're going to react in one of two ways. You're either going to get hurt or mad, which is, it's a way of covering up the hurt, or you're going to get defensive, or you're going to over-explain, you're going to try and convince. Essentially, all of this, it takes away that feeling of enthusiasm and excitement. And above all else, you no longer feel at peace. You're no longer at peace, and you're no longer confident in that inner voice that is calling you, that inner presence that has awakened that sense of enthusiasm and excitement, that inner knowing that just says this is the right next step for you. And I would say here, in this specific aspect, this is the biggest area where I see that my thinking has changed. I believed that the cause of my upset was something outside of me, that it was the things that the people were saying or doing that were causing me to lose my peace or to lose my confidence, and that they are separate from me. They have their own thoughts, they have their own beliefs, which are different from my own. Obviously their thoughts are in their brains and in their bodies, and my thoughts are in my body. And the best that we can do is try to understand one another, reach some kind of consensus, and somehow get along. And in that way, we would have peace. And obviously, as we look around ourselves, look around, our world, and we look at our experiences, and everything verifies that we are separate from one another. There is nothing that says that we are actually not separate. But as I continued kind of my spiritual studies after the end of our pilgrimage, and honestly, I wasn't looking for these spiritual teachings; they just came into my life. It was clear that I was being invited to expand my thinking around this idea, or this belief in me and them, this entire idea that we are separate. And really that it began, I would say, during our pilgrimage, but at the end of our pilgrimage, there was a powerful experience which reinforced it. And, throughout our pilgrimage, Alberto and I, we came from slightly, from different backgrounds, especially when it came to Christian teachings and Christian upbringings. I did not have the same foundation and the same base that he had. And so many times during our walk, especially because we were dealing, we were staying in monasteries in the beginning, we were staying in convents. So there would be a lot of conversations that were speaking about the Christ. And I really, it was all kind of new to me, in the sense of, this idea of the Christ being the light that is within you, this divine spark that is within, the essence of what you are. And so he applied kind of this term of this Christ consciousness, which to me, it was a new term, because I had not really heard it before, not really studied it before, but it was something that came up a lot in the conversations that he was, having with others, that I was listening to, and that, he was sharing with me his beliefs around this idea of the inner spark, or the divine spark, which is what I believed it was called from my own studies, kind of that divine light being called the Christ light. And so it was something that he was, he had referred to more than once. We had talked about it. And it was, it was interesting, because it kind of brought those teachings just a little bit closer into my world. But at the end of our pilgrimage, there was a very clear invitation to pursue the study of what this Christ consciousness meant. And it happened really after we left Jerusalem. We had finished our walk, and we decided to go visit Janet and Johanna. And I had actually visited them before I left on my walk to Jerusalem. I'm kind of jumping timelines a little bit, but I'll come back and explain this later. But before I went to Jerusalem, I actually did go to the Netherlands. I did meet with Johanna and with Jeanette, and they both, like meeting, it's like meeting the oracles before you embark on your quest. And they both gave me kind of that confidence to say, whatever has led you this far is walking with you. So walk, have faith, trust, keep following that inner voice, keep following those signs, and you'll be okay. And so when we finished, and that's what I was doing during our pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and when we came back, we decided that, they would be kind of the nice, kind of the good, that decompression point, that borderland between our lives as pilgrims and the life that awaited us, because, we didn't know still what we were going to do with our life. And when we were visiting with Johanna, we were having tea with her one afternoon, and I asked her actually about a picture or a painting that she had framed in a small frame sitting on the mantle. And I asked her who it was. It was basically of a Native American man with a beautiful feather headdress and a very kind, very loving smile. And I asked, who is this? Because I had seen that picture in a bookstore earlier that day. And she told me his name was White Eagle, and that he was part of a group of teachers who are helping humanity from outside, from beyond this realm, in our evolution and in the awakening of our consciousness, part of a group called the Ascended Masters. And I said, oh, okay. And then in a moment, she just stopped, and her eyes just welled up with tears. And she said, oh my God, he's here. And she wasn't looking at us. She was looking a little bit kind of beyond us. And every hair on my body was standing on end. I could feel this tremendous energy in her place where we were. And tears just started rolling down her eyes. She just said, there is just so much love here for you. She says, he knows Alberto. And she goes, I wish you could feel all of this love that he is pouring into you, Alberto. But she says, he doesn't know you yet, Mony. But he is a teacher. He is a teacher of the Christ consciousness. And that experience, not to spoil the book, but this idea of the Christ consciousness, this idea of the invitation to go and explore more deeply the meaning of the Christ, the meaning of that inner light that we all share, that divine spark that we all have, that is given to us by our one creator, Father, Mother, God, or source. This was the next step for me, the invitation to go explore even more deeply in that. And the Christ teachings, this is White Eagle, and I'll leave a link in the description if you want more information about the White Eagle. There's a White Eagle Lodge in the UK, which is White Eagle was channeled as an entity by Grace Cook in the 1920s, I think it was. And there's a very extensive body of information that's available for free online, and I will provide a link for you if you're interested in exploring a little bit more. And so the invitation for me was to go explore a little bit more deeply into the meaning of this Christ, the Christ consciousness. The Christ, of course, not being exclusive to any one religion, but again, that universal presence of God in each one of us, that this is what connects us to each other in a universal brotherhood. And peace begins with going inwards and remembering this, understanding this, awakening to this truth. And peace is created when we are in loving service to all. And so, obviously this teaching was not only adding on to and confirming what Alberto was kind of sharing with me as we were walking, and some of my own experiences with the figure of Jesus who came into my life during pilgrimage. This was a first for me, and I'll talk about that in another episode, but it's also in the book. But in a way, it was deepening kind of my journey inwards, a journey that began with conversations with God, which I talked about, that series. I talked about the series of books by Neale Donald Walsh in that last episode. And so they introduced this kind of, loving, non-punitive God, this idea of a humanity evolving in consciousness because, we're simply not there yet. And, this importance of a collective, this collective transformation, the collective action in the world as being the key to creating peace. This idea, if enough loving people work together, if consciousness evolves, if, the institutions become wiser, if we build bridges between people, then peace will be established in the world. This was my walk for peace. This was, I guess, in many ways inspired by that kind of, I had swallowed that, I had imbibed that vision, that Conversations with God was offering. And, my walk for peace was going to be my contribution to this awakening consciousness. This is what I'm doing for peace. And then I wasn't going to stop there. I was going to continue. I was going to work, like I said earlier, my dream, work for the United Nations, work for some NGO to come to help reconcile these conflicting peoples. This is the framework. This was the kind of the paradigm that I was working within. And although, Conversations with God, interestingly, did introduce this idea of separation as being an illusion, that we are one, I didn't quite understand what that meant back then. I didn't quite understand kind of how to make that work practically. And so I kind of left it aside and didn't quite pursue it. But it was clear to me that where I was being invited to go deeper now with the White Eagle teachings, go deeper and further into understanding what the Christ means. And also it introduced even more deeply the power of the mind. The mind being also a part of, what needs healing as we navigate in this world. And so all this kind of inner movement, the movement to heal, this idea of being separate, between me and you was underway with all of these teachings. But, I also see it now. When I look at it again, I see that these teachings still maintained separation. They didn't heal it. This idea that the cause of any conflict is because of outside forces. It's because of economic policies, political structures, the histories and the injustices of the past, the behaviors of certain individuals or groups who want power and not peace. They were continually looking outside at what is happening outside as being the cause of the conflict, is precisely keeping the idea that we are separate very much alive. It doesn't heal the idea of separation. It keeps it intact. And also, these teachings also kept a very subtle judgment alive. They didn't really heal this idea of, I'm a good person doing all the right things, but then there are those people out there who just won't ever change, who just do not share the same desire for peace as I do. So here I am. I'm doing, all this good in the world, whether it's walking or charity work or even, I don't know, organizing a protest or whatever, or a peace march. But there are others who are doing, let's say, in quotes, bad things. There are the conscious people, there are the unconscious people. There are the tyrants and there are the victims, the oppressors and the innocents. There are the destroyers and there are the peacemakers. And I was choosing to be a peacemaker. So again, I'm saying all of this with the benefit of hindsight, looking at all of this 25 years later, looking at how I was being led to heal the ideas inside of what I was able to accept. Because, obviously I wasn't able to accept all of the teachings that were coming at me all in one shot. So I was being given, I feel that the doses that I needed to understand what peace means. And I was being led to understand what the true cause of peace is and the true cause of conflict in a way that I could actually accept and not reject outright and say, no, there's no way that this is even possible. So again, there was this kind of continual movement, this refining, this shifting. And my part was to be willing, of course. My part was to be willing to undergo the inner process. And I wanted to keep looking inwards. I wanted to be shown. I wanted to learn. I truly wanted a peace that would not change every time there was something that was happening outside. And I think it was that kind of desire to be willing to be shown and to really understand peace. It led me to another teaching, which is Ho'oponopono. Which I see kind of now as being kind of the attempt to begin to place the cause of what was happening to be inwards, not something that was outwards. And for those who have never heard of Ho'oponopono, and I'll place some links in the description as well, it is an ancient forgiveness and healing practice that comes from the shamans of Hawaii, and that was popularized by the psychologist Dr. Hugh Len and by Joe Vitale. The focus, and again, I'll leave the descriptions below, the focus of this teaching, however, which was interesting, was not about changing others. It wasn't about looking outside. It wasn't about, judging what they were doing. It wasn't about trying to convince anybody of anything else, or even to try to heal whatever the situation appeared to be outside. It was about healing the apparent conflict at its source, which is the mind, the subconscious mind especially, the deeply buried beliefs that we have, the fears that we carry, the traumas and the survival mechanisms that we have developed around them, the defense mechanisms that have resulted from these experiences, our many expectations. All of that is buried in the subconscious, and we all have them. We all carry them in one way or another, and they play out in the experiences that we have and in the relationships that we have. So this Ho'oponopono was about taking 100% responsibility for these thoughts being within me, not outside, and these thoughts being the cause of what I am experiencing outwardly in my world, which is the effect. It was radical in a way because, it was placing all responsibility on me, on my thoughts, on my interpretations. But at the same time, it was loving because it was saying, it's just something that's unhealed within me. That's all. There wasn't any judgment. It was just saying it's something that is not healed and that can be healed. And the power to heal that is also within you. And so I felt so empowered by it. It was, again, I mentioned Zero Limits by Joe Vitale. And he speaks about his experiences with Dr. Hugh Len. There's also a teacher named Mabel Katz. She's also another great teacher who speaks in English and in Spanish, which I'll leave links to. And they were all they the teaching and what they're espousing is this idea of going inwards. You're not going to look out. When there is a difficult situation, you're going to look in. And you probably recognize this teaching from the phrases that you've probably seen kind of popularized in many little memes and whatever. And the words are, I am sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you. Those are the words, the 4 phrases that many people just repeat with kind of in a cycle, just keep repeating those words over and over again. And while that's very important, I think it's very good as a practice, there is something, deeper going on, because, you have to understand the context of it. Like, who are you speaking to? Who are you apologizing to? Who are you saying these things to? And so it's applied in a couple of different ways, but the main thing to understand is that you're not speaking to another person. You're not apologizing to another person. You are not seeking forgiveness from another person. That's not the focus of Ho'oponopono. This is all inner work. What you are doing with repeating these phrases is you are appealing to the divine within you to correct these errors that are within you, to transmute them, to transform them into light, to take all of these beliefs, these erroneous beliefs, to take all of these memories, which you take responsibility for, by the way, but you are allowing them to be transformed and to be healed and to be returned to light. And light and love is our natural state. So that's where the work is directed. It's directed to the inner thoughts, inner memories, the subconscious mind. And at the same time, similar to the work that you do, for example, in modern psychology with inner child work, you're looking inwards, and you can speak to the inner child. You're apologizing to that part of you for carrying these harmful beliefs and these memories for so long, because you didn't know any other way of responding, or you didn't know any other way of handling this difficult situation or experience. You didn't know any other way to receive love or to give love. So you're speaking to that inner child. Instead of just kind of saying, I'm speaking to the subconscious mind, you can also direct it in a way and say, I'm speaking to, that inner child, that child in me that didn't know any other way and has been carrying all of this for their entire life without knowing how to heal them. And you can obviously, also speak to the feelings themselves that all of these experiences evoked, be it, shame or guilt or feeling impotent in a situation, and allow all of that to be released. But the point is, this is all inner work. It is not directed at anybody outside. And why is this important? Why is Ho'oponopono important? Why was it especially important for me? Because the outer world is a reflection or a mirror of your inner mental and emotional state. It shows you exactly what is going on in your mind, not necessarily conscious mind, the unconscious mind, what is not yet resolved or healed. So by cleaning or by healing this inner world, you are cleaning the outer world. You are healing the outer world, and you are healing all the people that are implicated at the same time in this situation. And in the terminology of Ho'oponopono, it says it's returning you to a zero state, which is why, the book is called Zero Limits. But this zero state sounds like it's returning you to nothingness or emptiness. But no, it's not that. It is it's kind of erasing a whiteboard. It's erasing all of the stuff that you have used to cover up your essence, your beauty, your purity, your divinity, the light that you are, the Christ that you are. So it returns you, it's clearing, removing all of these, healing all of these limitations and all of these fears and all of these memories, so that the light that you are, the brilliance that you are, can shine in the world. I'll let you explore more if you're interested. But for me, this teaching completely changed me. Because first of all, it gave me something to do. Being action-oriented and liking to have, my goals. The other teachings, of, white eagle and the Christ consciousness and conversations with God and the divine light, all of that was great, that we are one, super. And they did inspire peace. I did feel at peace when I was reading them until I went out into the world again and I saw something that upset me or that made me want to, judge and condemn, and how could they be doing or saying these things. So Ho'oponopono gave me a tool and gave me something to apply in difficult situations that came up, or if there was a memory from the past or an experience from the past that came up, I knew how to work with it. And I saw the effects that it had, not only in the peace that it brought to me, but also in the peace that I saw was happening in my relationships to some of the difficult situations that I was living through at the time. And it was a peace that stayed. And I loved it. I loved it. I thought I had found the practice. I did not need anything else on my spiritual journey. That's it. I found Ho'oponopono. I had something that I could work with. I could look within. I could allow the healing to be done. And it connected me with the divine, with that spark, that light within. And I truly felt a tremendous peace. Until A Course in Miracles came along, which I didn't think I needed, which I wasn't looking for. Again, it wasn't something that I was out, actively seeking a new teaching. It literally came to me. Again, Alberto brought it to me and said, this is something that I think is really important for you to kind of explore. And I resisted until I finally, I started, and I felt guided to kind of say, take this step. This is the next step. And once I kind of got over all of my kind of resistance and all of my judgments about, the very extreme terminology that I felt in the Course, which I now understand to be just barriers that I was putting up so that I wouldn't really, truly go deeper. Really, this Course, A Course in Miracles, is a perfect merging or blending of the White Eagle teachings on the Christ consciousness and the mind healing responsibility of Ho'oponopono. That's two of them together. Basically, it says, your essence is divine light. You are the Christ spirit. You are whole, complete, perfect, pure. This is your true identity. This is the identity of all creation that is given us by our one Creator. This is what is true, what is real, and what is forever unchanging, untouchable. There is nothing you can do or say or think that will ever change who you truly are, what was given you by your Creator. This is the Christ teaching. This is the Christ that we are, this divine light. And at the same time, it says, you also carry within you a lot of memories and a lot of beliefs and fears that you are projecting outwards onto the screen, onto what you are calling the real world, but that is nothing more than the mirror showing you what is the state of your inner beliefs and your inner fears and your interpretations and all your, the grievances that you don't want to let go of, the anxieties that you feel, maybe shame, maybe guilt, maybe feeling unworthy. So many, it's just a potpourri of things that are going on in your inner world that you are seeing in what you're calling your outer world, your real world. But that is not the real world. And what needs healing, again, is this inner ecosystem, the inner paradigm, the inner thoughts. This is what needs healing. And healing them heals your outer world. Again, this is Ho'oponopono, same. So up to now, it's like fantastic. But it goes one step further. And the step that the Course invites is the awakening or the opening of our mind, or the willingness to consider that the outer world that I am looking at, which I am projecting outwards, is not real, because the ideas that it represents are not true. So like I said, what I'm seeing with my eyes, when I look out into the world as Mony, what am I seeing? My eyes are showing me moving pictures, images that are very convincing. They are showing me the images or the representation of every thought or fear, big or small, that I have within me. It is showing me outwardly my entire thought system. And that's playing out in front of me on a screen, like a 3D interactive screen that I'm calling the real world. But it is just a screen, like a movie screen. And my mind, with all of its fears and beliefs, with all of its thoughts, is the projector. So think of the analogy of a dream, okay? A dream that you have at night. You're lying in bed, you're asleep, and you're dreaming. And the figures in the dream, sometimes the dream is something that's very pleasing and makes you smile and you're very happy. But other times the dreams are like nightmares and I don't know, you're chased by zombies, I don't know, or you have somebody who's trying to attack you, or you're running away and you can't quite get away, or, you know, the ground kind of, you know, you feel like you're walking through mud and you can't quite advance. So many, you know, images that come up in your dream. But who is the one who is dreaming them? How many people are there in that dream? It's only you, no? It's only the person who is sleeping. And it is the mind of the person who is sleeping who is projecting all of these images in a dream, which seem very real. Sometimes, you know, you wake up with heart palpitations, you wake up scared, you wake up happy. These images, though, are just images that have been fabricated by a mind that is asleep, but you believe them real. You experience them as being very real. And then you wake up and you go, oh, it was just a dream. It's nothing to worry about. This is the world that we are currently living. This is the analogy that the Course is trying to bring you to understand, is that you are the dreamer of your dream. And what you are seeing in this what you call the real world are just the projections or the images, the moving images of all of the thoughts that you have within you, and you're seeing them outside. But these images that I'm seeing, just like in a dream at night, they cannot be real because they are ideas. They are showing me ideas within me that affirm that we are separate from one another, that we exist in bodies, that we're separate from one another. We have thoughts that are, you know, I have my thoughts, you have your thoughts. Your intentions are different from my intentions. Sometimes I can trust them, sometimes I can't. They usually conflict, you know, with mine. I maybe have to defend myself in order to feel safe, you know. So these images are affirming that we are separate from one another. And they also tell me that, you know, not only am I separate from you and people are separate from one another, we are definitely separate from our Creator, from our one source. If we even believe, by the way, that we have a Creator or a source that is not us. So these ideas that we are separate, those are what's not true. They are actually like a veil that I cast out or project upon what is true and what is real. That's what my eyes are showing me. So what is true? What is real? What I said earlier, we are the Christ, that divine light. We are not separate from one another. We are eternally one with all of life, with all of our brothers, with our one Creator. We are love without opposite, peace without opposite, joy without opposite, pure spirit, a union that can never, ever be divided or fragmented into bodies that attack one another, that exist only to extend and expand this beautiful love and light that was given us by our Creator. There is no separation. Separation is an idea that we have accepted and that we are experiencing as very real. Of course we are. We experience it as real, but it is an idea that is false. And like any idea, it can be corrected. That's the good news, just like in Ho'oponopono. This is the essence of the Course. You know, it is healing the belief in separation. It heals the idea that we are separate from one another. Which, by the way, looking at it now, is how my journey began, with conversations with God, saying that separation is illusion, but I wasn't quite ready to consider or accept that idea. But obviously this is a key part of how I was and I am being led, is to understand that the next the next step in healing is recognizing that I am in a dream. Each one of us is in a dream, dreaming their own stories of being separate and being afraid and being anxious and being small and being limited or being guilty or being ashamed or being angry or being vengeful or being innocent and a victim or being an aggressor. Whatever the story is, the root idea is that we are separate. We are separate from love. We are separate from peace. And that very idea is what causes the beginning, is the beginning of feeling afraid and feeling separate. You know, there is obviously a lot more that I can say about it, but for now, let me bring it back to, again, why this is important for peace and how my thinking about peace has since evolved. Since, you know, from 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago now, I would say, from when I started reading Conversations with God. So essentially, you know, when I am looking at any person or any situation that awakens anger in me or fear or, you know, judgment or the desire to condemn or to attack, I am not seeing truly. I am not seeing the Christ either in them or the Christ in me. What I am seeing are my judgments. Again, I talked about this, my fears, my own inner conflicts, my own grievances and resentments that I don't want to let go of because I think they're real and true and they happened and I'm the victim and I don't want to let them go. I'm also seeing the image that I have painted of myself also in what I am attacking. I am seeing all of this out there. Again, I put this in quotation marks. I'm seeing them out there so that I can keep attacking them. I can keep judging these ideas. I can keep isolating myself even more from love. I can keep separating myself even more from my brothers, going further and further away from the love that binds us without ever truly healing these thoughts. By continually looking outwards, attacking outwards, saying the cause is out there, I am not looking at the true cause, which is inwards. And I will just keep repeating. If not in, you know, this particular experience and another experience. Many of you will notice, will probably, you know, relate to the idea that I seem to be repeating the same story over and over again. Different circumstances, different personalities, different people. However, the core problem is the same. The core feelings are the same. The core ideas and the resentments that it awakens in me are the same. That's because the cause is not out there. The cause is in the mind that needs to be healed. And what we are experiencing apparently out there is the effect. Now, at the beginning of this podcast, this episode, I started talking about, you know, this calling to go to Jerusalem and how when I started sharing my story and this desire to walk with other people, and I did not get the support that I expected. In fact, I had people actively trying to talk me out of it. I was blaming them. For being the cause of, you know, every doubt and every fear that I was experiencing. It was their fault that I was feeling that way because they were putting all of that in me. And obviously now, in light of everything that I've just shared with you today, obviously I would say that they were just reflecting just my own fears and my own doubts. Those were all inside of me anyway. They're not the source. They were just the mirror showing me what I was already questioning the whole time within myself, maybe not necessarily verbalizing it and not wanting to verbalize it. And so now I wouldn't say, so-and-so was trying to dissuade me, or they didn't understand me or support me, or they were just even worried about me and they only wanted me to be safe. I would say, with this particular person, I see my fear that I've projected upon them, or in this conversation, I see my desire to be liked and to be accepted and to be respected for my choices. And that's why I'm angry and defensive. I feel like I need the approval of others to make me feel confident in my choices. And that's what needs healing. All of that, not what they're saying, because they are just reflecting what's already inside of me. And what I am seeing and what what my eyes are showing me, it actually is preventing me from recognizing what is our inherent oneness. What is it that really joins us as brothers? And that is, like I said earlier, the biggest change. that has happened and how I approach any situation today that appears to be conflictive, or that is that just brings me out of peace, or that doesn't make me feel confident, or that takes me out of this feeling of being present. I pause. I would say that's the biggest thing that these teachings have brought, especially A Course in Miracles and Ho'oponopono, is I pause a lot more. I don't engage as quickly because I recognize, what am I engaging with? I'm engaging with my thoughts, with the images. The cause is not out there. I have an opportunity here. I have an opportunity to heal the cause at its source. Okay, and so I'm not as quick to blame or to try to convince or to kind of to worry. I definitely do the inner work. And if there's a situation that I'm in, if I can, I may excuse myself, maybe go to the washroom and do this inner work that I'm going to kind of talk about in a second. Obviously, if the situation is highly conflictive and somebody is yelling at me, which that doesn't really happen, I won't tolerate abuse or attack. If it ever does happen, I would just simply walk away. But I do the inner work as soon as I can. So again, whether I stay or whether I walk away, in my mind, which I have 100% control over, I say something along the lines of, what I am seeing and what I'm experiencing here cannot be real or true, because I'm not at peace. What I'm seeing doesn't reflect love or peace or harmony, which is my natural state. I don't know exactly where, what it is. I don't know where it's come from. But I do know that the cause can only be some error in my thinking, some memory from my past that's not healed. I am willing to heal that cause. I am willing to be at peace. I'm willing to see this situation differently. I'm willing to see my brothers differently, myself differently. I want peace. I want it for me, above all else, for me and for all. I want to see truly through the eyes of the Christ, through the eyes of love. I want to see what eternally joins me to my brothers, not what separates me from them. I want to see that light. I want to see the Christ. I want to see what is eternally unchanging in them and in me. Something like that. It's more or less, this is this idea of, I go inwards and I do the work in my mind. I may not say those words to them. In fact, I usually don't, but I do the work inwardly. Again, I have the power. The power is within me to choose whether I'm going to keep, attacking outwardly or defending my posture, or recognize the error at its source and allow it to be healed. I will obviously be talking more about this inner practice, this inner vision as we go along. And I'm going to, with Alberto, the two of us, hopefully interpret many of the experiences from our pilgrimages through that lens. Because I do believe that true healing, true peace, that lasts is found by doing this. Because with this, I can look at the past and I can look at all the characters in it now from a different perspective, from a loving gaze, from a healed perception, not just, continually saying, they did this and I did that and I was forced to do this because they, they spoke to me in that way or they rejected me. It heals my perception. It looks beyond the illusion that we are separate, and it looks at oneness. So I'm able to look through a lens or through a vision that is not judgmental. And to me, that's important, because it also liberates this idea of judging as something that is, that's my right. Of course I'm going to judge, they did this to me, and judging another is right, and it is true, and it is even necessary. And also liberating this idea that, my judgment of the situation and my interpretation and my conclusions were right because I was there and I experienced it, and so it is right. How I interpreted it is right. It liberates, this practice liberates this altogether, this idea altogether. It liberates me, of course, and not only the people who are implicated in this situation, but it liberates all people. in ways that I cannot even imagine or perceive, because, mind is not separated. Mind is one. We are joined in that. And I will talk about that, obviously, as we go along. This practice is obviously healing the idea that we are separate from one another, and we are not. And this is what brings peace. This obviously is now how this is how I look at the world and how I move in it. This is how I maintain peace that is more and more unaffected by what my eyes see, but that actively calls forth what is true and eternal in my brother. It is a practice that seeks for the face of the divine, that light in all, and it is a practice that guides any action that I am called, or that I feel called to do, but that is an action that is aligned in the truth, in unity, in oneness, not in separation and fear. And finally, I think to wrap up today's episode, after going through all of this, it's funny, I began writing this, or kind of reflecting on what this episode would be, and it kind of flowed in one way, and then it completely shifted course. And it went into this very deep exploration of kind of that inner journey that I was on, in a very unexpected way. That was not how I expected it to go. But I do see, very clearly now, more clearly today, that the true call that I was being asked to follow, it really wasn't about just Jerusalem. I needed to go on Jerusalem because that was, I think, what, it was clear that I needed action in order to put a lot of this into practice and to awaken to this way of thinking. But the true call I was following was, that I was being asked to follow was, this one was to listen to this, the inner guide, and to the teacher who was presenting me with this vision, with these ideas, this way of practicing, and to follow them, to put them into action, to live them. Because this is what would lead me to the peace that I was truly seeking, this peace that is unchanged by all the happenings of the world. And I've mentioned this inner guide, this inner teacher many times now, that presence that is with us, that loving presence. And the next episode will absolutely be dedicated to learning more about this inner guide and what their role is in peace. So until then, I hope that today's sharing has inspired some personal reflections, perhaps invited an awareness of another way of looking at peace, where the source of true healing lies, and above all, the love that guides our inner journey, our journey home. May this peace, this opening that we have created here, extend to all. I thank you all for walking with me today, and I hope to see you next time on the next episode. Buen camino until then.